Covered bridges are common in the picturesque Green Mountains. And nestled here is the village of Woodstock, one of the most beautiful communities in Vermont. The first settlers arrived in 1765, and by the year 1800, Woodstock had grown to a population of 2,100. It was then, and still is, an agricultural community, which derives part of its income from the surrounding sugar bush country. In the early days, sugaring was a very important event in the spring, as most people depended on maple sugar for their sweetening. And today, the maple sugar industry still flourishes in the Woodstock area. Sugaring begins in the early spring, long before the first thaw. Trails have to be broken before the laborious task of tapping trees and hanging buckets can begin. 2 experienced New Englanders can hang as many as 400 buckets in a single day. When all the trees have been tapped, the waiting begins. Then one day, the air has a different smell. There is power in the sun's brightness. The time is here. The sap has begun to run. In days gone by, sap was gathered with the aid of hand-hewn shoulder yokes, like the one shown here. The yoke is old, but the girl is young. She's Miss Marjorie McNall, daughter of a sugar maker and a recent Queen of the Maple Harvest. Another early method of gathering the sap involved oxen. On the Arthur Maxim farm, the old tradition still exists, and each spring finds 3 generations heading into the sugar bush. The Maxims hang about 1,500 buckets, and their blue ribbon oxen remain as a nostalgic tie with early Vermont. Sugaring is one of the few remaining jobs for Old Dobbin. On the Harold Eastman farm, horses haul an average of 18,000 gallons of sap each spring. When boiled down, that's a little over 500 gallons of maple syrup. While the practice of maple sugaring is old, the method of harvesting has progressed. And today on many farms, the small crawler tractor has taken over. We're on the Howard Burns farm in South Woodstock, where each year they produce about 125 gallons of maple syrup. It's a winter wonderland that keeps 2 men busy most of the day with a sled and a 4-barrel gathering tank. There are more than 1,000 buckets in the sugar grove, and during the 3 to 4 week sap run, each bucket must be emptied every day. An old sugar-making maxim tells the farmer to gather often and boil at once. It takes about 40 gallons of sap to make 1 gallon of syrup. The length and quantity of the sap run is determined by the temperature. Best results occur when the nights are cold and the days warm. An average tree may yield 15 gallons of sap each season. The sled with the first of the year's run arrives at the sugar house, and before long, it will be transformed into fancy maple syrup. Unloading is a simple matter. The sap hose is tapped, and the crystal clear liquid cascades down a chute into the storage vat. Steam coming through the roof means there's life inside. The fire is being stoked for the year's run. This typical weather-beaten sugar house was built back in 1910 and hasn't missed a season. Since 98% of the sap is water, processing involves boiling until a proper concentration remains. A full cord of wood is required to make about 15 gallons of maple syrup, and the hotter the fire, the better the product. Mr. Burns has been in the sugar business since 1900, and his knowledge of the trade was handed down to him by his grandfather. This evaporator pan handles about 3 barrels of sap per hour. thus producing 3 gallons of syrup per hour. Testing is done with a long-handled scoop. And when the fluid tears off the dipper in a sheet, it's time to syrup off. This batch is ready. But what about the grade of the product? Well, the state of Vermont supplies a guide to all maple sugar producers. And by law, their syrup must be marked accordingly. If the syrup is lighter in color than this bottle, it is grade B. Lighter than this one, it's grade A. And lighter than this one, it's fancy. Sugaring is an important springtime business for the farmers of Vermont, as it is for farmers in other areas where the sugar maple flourishes. And the products of this picturesque business are a tempting reminder of springtime in Vermont.